So I want to continue on the subject of the Mythic Warrior men's training, specifically weekend 3, which we call the dad or the father's weekend. In my last post, I talked about what we did on Friday night, the story of the hunter and the son, and this choice men were in to kill the father or kill the chief. And the whole point of that story was to get men really invested in and feel their emotions around their wounding, whether it was from the father, whether from the culture, or whatever. So, having had that first evening, what we do is on the next morning, we get up and before breakfast, we go outside and do the dance of life, which is a dance to the 6 directions, bringing in the energy of the east and bringing it up to into our hearts and up to the sky, then bringing it down and offering it to the earth, and gathering the energy of the earth and pivoting and giving it to the west, and gathering the energy of the west and coming back to the center. And because of that pivot, we're now facing south. And we then do the movement to the south, from the south to Father Sky, to Mother Earth, to our hearts, back to the south, then the north, and then we pivot, and then we're facing west, etc. So after doing that, and then this very fun exercise called Willow in the Wind, which is very energetic and fun, we come in and we have our breakfast. And then off to our work for the morning. So we start by to bring up that subject of men and their wounds, and we start by talking about these images of the devouring father, because certainly in Western civilization, there are a lot of images and myths and stories about the father and the son conflict. So it even starts way back in Greek mythology, where Kronos, who in Roman mythology is called Saturn, hears that one day he'll be replaced by one of his children. So he essentially eats them all. And, uh, and again, one is hidden away, which turns into Zeus, who eventually overthrows Kronos. But there's this sense of the conflict or the threat of the child to the father in Western civilization. This appears many, many times where, in the biblical story of the birth of Christ, Herod heard that he would be replaced by the Son of Man, the King of the Jews, and so he goes through the land of Bethlehem and Palestine to kill all the children, and Mary and Joseph have to flee to Egypt. In another story of prophecy of the child essentially killing and taking the place of the father is Oedipus. Oedipus's father, Laius, has again heard this prophecy that he will be killed and replaced by his child. So he essentially tells a shepherd to, take this kid out and on the hillside and kill him. But the shepherd just doesn't have the heart for it, and so he just leaves him there and to be devoured by wolves or whatever. But the child survives, and later on, not knowing who his father is, Oedipus kills Laius and winds up sleeping with his mother. In another mythic story, Acrisius, who's is told that his son Perseus will eventually kill and replace him, and essentially the same thing happens there as happens with Oedipus. And there are also many stories where in mythology where, in some sense, the father or the king essentially attempts or does kill the child to gain favor or to gain advantage. Again, in the Trojan War, Agamemnon was the chief, the leader of the whole Greek fleet who was going to go out to Troy and do battle in the Trojan War. But as they gathered their 10,000 ships and got ready to leave, there was no wind. They couldn't sail. And after days and days and days, Agamemnon goes to the oracle and asks what he can do to gain favor with the winds so that he and his army can go to war. And he's told essentially, kill your daughter, Iphigenia. So Agamemnon kills his daughter, Iphigenia, to get the winds to go off for war. And a biblical story. Abraham, it goes up to the mountain to kill Isaac to gain favor and be obedient to his God. So there are many, many stories in mythology or in Western culture about this conflict between the father and child, where the child is, instead of being seen as part of a natural progression, like this year's milkweed produces all these seeds that will then be cast to the wind and become the natural progression of next year's crop of milkweed. In fact, no, the son is seen as the threat to the present order. So after sharing all this with men, we have them lie down, get comfortable, and we share a dream. I call it the dream of the man on the cross. One time years ago, when I was leading a workshop on men in the shadow, one of the men came in the morning having had this dream. So I actually share this dream with the men in Mythic Warrior. So in the dream, the man is being crucified. He's up on a cross high on a hill. Oh, yeah, this must have some association, right? But anyway, in the dream, he's up on the cross, he's nailed to the cross, he's in incredible pain, and he's crying and asks, pleading to the sky, the earth, whatever, someone to help him. But he's high on this hill, and below he can see the fields stretching out in the distance and the forests around the fields. So he's up there feeling so miserable. And then way down below, he sees a knight on a horse coming out from the forest. And this knight is dressed completely in black. He has black armor, and he's on a black horse. So the knight and the horse starts to trot across the field, and he's just pleading and crying, and the knight below hears him. And slowly turns the horse and rides up the hill, and gets to the point where the knight is right below this person on the cross having the dream, and the man on the cross pleads to the knight, please help me. But when the knight lifts up the visor of his armor, and the man on the cross realizes it's his father. And the father takes out the sword and runs it into his side. Now, this is fascinating because the night before, in the story of the hunter and the son, the chief gave the sword to the son. And so in this story, the knight gives the sword to the son in a very different way. And and again, this story has a very interesting and mixed message, because on the one hand, it could be seen as a story of abandonment, abuse, another story of wounding. But there is also a part of that story, in the actual crucifixion, that the death in Christ's story, his death is required for him to become, instead of the man, to move from Jesus to Christ. His death is required for his resurrection. His death is required for him to move from human biological being to kind of sacred divine being. So it's a very mixed, it's a wonderful dream, but we kind of repeat it. So we have these images of fathers and sons and wounding. And so after that, the men are lying on the floor, or lying laying comfortably, and they're taken through a relaxation process and told they're about to go on a shamanic journey. And I'm not going to go into all the details of that, but there's a process where we actually we ask them to imagine the wound from their father and where that's located in their body. And so, having done that, we have a shamanic journey which takes them into the wound, and this shamanic journey lasts maybe a total of 20 minutes. And so, at the end of that, men are given a bit of time to write in their journal about it, but we come back and the men share what happened on that shamanic journey. And I got to say, it was fascinating. All of this information, which, of course, you would never get from your rational mind trying to analyze your relationship with your father. So that was a very, very rich sharing this weekend. And after that sharing, we went right into our next exercise, which required the men to actually go outside. They were all given trowels, and they were told to go outside, find a place on the land, and dig a hole. And once they had dug this hole, they were going to, quote unquote, vomit the poison from their father into the hole. And so they would begin by saying a prayer to Mother Earth. This prayer, because Mother Earth has this great capacity to take what's waste from one form of life and turn it into something useful, some kind of compost for something else. So the men have dug the hole and they've made this prayer, and then they get over the hole. They may stand over it, they may get on their hands and knees over it, and metaphorically vomit the poison, the toxicity from their father into the hole. So for some men, that involves speaking it into the hole. For some men, it could be speaking and then yelling and screaming those emotions into the hole. It could involve spitting. It could involve making those big visceral body upchucking sounds into the hole. And until it felt like they'd completely released some sense of the toxic residue from their relationship with their father and cast it in, given it to nature, given it to the mother, given it to the land. And then after that was done, they would, rake or scrape the earth back into the hole and tamp it down and make a prayer that not just that it was turned into something useful for another form of life, but also make the prayer that having released this, that there would be this open, empty space inside that could be filled with something more nurturing and useful. So in my next post, I'm going to go into, after this, we all took a break and came back for one of the big rituals of the weekend, which is called doing a death lodge with our fathers. And so I'll speak about that in the next post. But I do want to say that, as you can see, all of the things we did in the morning, the moving into the dream world, the dream of the man on the cross, this father having preceded that with images from myths of the past, and then going into a shamanic journey, and then, doing this visceral body release, is all about addressing the residue of our relationships with our father in a non-rational, a way that's outside the realm of reason and its repetitious use of words. Oftentimes, much of the problem of therapy and much of the problem of not just men's life, but everyone's life, is we've been so trained that if we want to access something, we go into our heads. We start talking about it. virtually all talk therapy just repeats the same thing again and again. How are you feeling? And we analyze our feelings. And honestly, if we want to heal ourselves, we're not going to, probably not going to do it by continuing our internal dialogue. If healing ourselves was a matter of needing more talk, we would have done it already, because that repetitive and habitual internal dialogue won't get us to where we need to go to heal ourselves in this life. And so in Mythic Warrior, we're constantly finding other ways to bring these conflicts and these questions and these resonances up to consciousness that don't just involve us going into our inner dialogue, our rational mind, and continuing to do what we always do. Blessing on you, who's ever out there, and have a good day.